The warm sand between my toes should have been relaxing, but my heart was pounding as I paced along the shoreline in Miami Beach. The waves crashed rhythmically beside me while I held my phone tight against my ear, negotiating what would become the biggest deal of my career, a $2 million commercial property acquisition from Meridian Construction. "Sarah, I understand your concerns about the timeline," I said to the client, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. A group of teenagers were playing volleyball nearby, their laughter mixing with the seagulls' cries. "But I can guarantee we'll have the permits processed within 30 days of closing. I've already spoken with the city planning department." My husband Jake emerged from our beachfront hotel, 2 iced coffees in hand. He raised his eyebrows questioningly, and I mouthed, "Almost done," while continuing to walk the water's edge. This was supposed to be our first real vacation in 3 years, a long weekend celebrating our 10th anniversary. But when Sarah Mitchell, CEO of a major retail chain, finally returned my calls after months of pursuit, I wasn't about to let it slip away. "The location is perfect for your flagship store," I continued, stopping to watch a pelican dive into the turquoise water. "Prime foot traffic, parking for 200 vehicles, and we can customize the interior to your exact specifications." 20 minutes later, I hung up with a verbal agreement that would net Meridian Construction their biggest commission this quarter. My hands were shaking as I walked back toward Jake, who was now lounging in a beach chair, scrolling through his phone with a concerned expression. "Everything okay?" I asked, settling into the chair beside him and finally accepting the coffee he'd been patiently holding. You need to see this," he said, turning his phone toward me. My work email was open, and I could see the subject line that made my blood run cold. Immediate disciplinary action. Unprofessional conduct. My stomach dropped as I read the message from Marcus Webb, my direct supervisor. "Emma, your unavailability during business hours while on vacation is unacceptable. Multiple clients have complained about not being able to reach you, and your absence from yesterday's team meeting was noted. This behavior is unprofessional and violates company policy regarding work accessibility. We need to discuss your employment status immediately. Report to my office Monday morning at 8 a.m. Marcus Webb, Regional Director, Meridian Construction." "Are you kidding me?" I said aloud, causing a nearby family to glance over. "I just closed a $2 million deal for them, and they're complaining about availability." Jake leaned closer, reading over my shoulder. "Didn't you tell them you'd be checking emails and available for emergencies?" "Of course I did." I stood up abruptly, sand cascading from my sundress. I've been working 12-hour days for 3 years straight. We postponed this trip twice because of their urgent projects. And the one time I take a long weekend, they act like I've disappeared to Mars. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Marcus was sending disciplinary emails, I was literally working on the beach, securing the biggest deal his division would see this year. I pulled up my call log to show Jake 17 work-related calls in the past 2 days, including early morning conferences with contractors and late-night planning sessions with architects. "Look at this," I said, my voice rising with frustration. "I talked to the Henderson project team at 7 a.m. yesterday. I reviewed blueprints for the downtown complex at 9 p.m. Thursday. I've been more available on this vacation than some people are at their desks." A group of college students nearby were setting up a volleyball net, their carefree energy a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my chest. This was exactly why we needed this break. The constant pressure, the impossible expectations, the complete lack of work-life balance that Meridian demanded. "What are you going to do?" Jake asked, his voice gentle but concerned. I stared out at the ocean, watching a cargo ship slowly move across the horizon. 3 years ago, I joined Meridian as their top commercial real estate specialist, bringing in clients and closing deals that my predecessors couldn't even get meetings for. I'd built relationships with developers across Florida, negotiated complex zoning agreements, and consistently exceeded every sales target they set. But in all that time, I'd never felt appreciated. Every success was quickly forgotten. Every vacation request was met with guilt trips about abandoning the team, and every innovation I proposed was either ignored or credited to someone else, usually Marcus himself. "You know what?" I said, turning back to Jake with a determination that surprised even me. "I'm not going to beg for my job. I'm going to call Marcus right now and have this conversation on my terms." "Are you sure?" Jake set down his coffee and stood up, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Maybe wait until we get home. Talk to HR first." "No," I said, already dialing Marcus's direct line. "I'm tired of being treated like I'm disposable when I'm the one bringing in the money that pays his salary." The phone rang 3 times before Marcus answered with his characteristically brusque tone. "Webb here." "Marcus, it's Emma. I got your email." "Good. I hope you understand the seriousness of—" "Actually," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm, "I think you need to understand something. While you were sending me disciplinary emails, I was closing the Mitchell account. $2 million in revenue, Marcus. The deal you've been telling me was impossible for 8 months." There was silence on the other end, broken only by the sound of waves and distant laughter from the beach. That's beside the point, Emma. Company policy clearly states. Company policy also states that exceptional performance should be recognized and rewarded. When's the last time that happened? I could hear Marcus typing in the background, probably looking up the Mitchell account details. Jake was watching me with a mixture of pride and concern, clearly impressed by my directness, but worried about the consequences. "Look, Emma, just come in Monday and we'll discuss." "No, Marcus, we're going to discuss it right now, because in about 5 minutes, I'm going to decide whether Meridian Construction deserves to have me as an employee or if I'd be better off taking my client relationships and my track record somewhere else." The silence stretched longer this time. A seagull landed near our chairs, eyeing Jake's untouched bagel with obvious intent. The normalcy of the scene, the beach, the families enjoying their weekend, the simple pleasure of coffee and sunshine, stood in sharp contrast to the corporate drama unfolding in my ear. "Emma, let's not be hasty here," Marcus finally said, his tone noticeably different. "You're a valuable member of our team. Valuable enough to trust with a 4-day weekend without micromanaging my every move." "Well, the thing is, Emma, there were complaints." "From who?" "Because I have a call log showing I've been in contact with every active client. I have emails proving I've responded to every urgent request. So either you're lying about the complaints or someone's lying to you." Jake gave me a thumbs up, clearly enjoying watching me stand up for myself in a way I'd been avoiding for years. But even as I felt empowered by finally confronting Marcus directly, I knew this conversation was crossing a line that would be hard to uncross. "Emma, I think we should table this discussion until Monday when we can sit down face to face," Marcus said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice now. He was used to employees backing down, apologizing, accepting his authority without question. "Actually, I think we should finish it right now," I replied, walking further down the beach to distance myself from other vacationers. "Because I've made a decision, Marcus. I quit." The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment I felt a rush of pure terror. What had I just done? I'd thrown away a stable job, a steady paycheck, and 3 years of building my reputation in the industry. But underneath the fear was something else, relief. "You what?" "Emma, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. I'll email my formal resignation when I get back to the hotel. I'll finish out my notice period remotely, transition my active clients, and then I'm done." "Emma, wait. Let's not do anything we'll regret here. Look, maybe I came on too strong with the email. We can work this out." I almost laughed at the complete reversal in his tone. 20 minutes ago, I was facing disciplinary action for unprofessional conduct. Now that he realized he might lose his top performer, Suddenly everything was negotiable. Marcus, here's what I regret. I regret working through pneumonia last winter because you said the Henderson project couldn't wait. I regret missing my sister's wedding because you scheduled a critical client meeting that got canceled anyway. I regret believing that loyalty and hard work would be appreciated instead of just expected. Jake had followed me down the beach and was standing a respectful distance away, clearly trying to give me space for this conversation while staying close enough to offer support. His presence reminded me of all the dinners he'd eaten alone, all the weekend plans he'd canceled to accommodate my work schedule, all the times he'd told friends and family that I couldn't make it to important events because of Meridian's demands. What about your clients? Marcus tried a different approach. They depend on you, Emma. You can't just abandon them. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm transitioning them to someone who'll hopefully treat them with more respect than you've treated me. And honestly, most of my clients have become personal relationships over the years. I doubt they'll have trouble finding me if they need to. This was true and we both knew it. Sarah Mitchell hadn't called the main Meridian number looking for whoever handles commercial real estate. She'd specifically asked for Emma Rodriguez because I'd spent months building trust with her, understanding her business needs, and proving I could deliver results. The same was true for most of my major accounts. Emma, please, don't make a rash decision. Take the weekend, cool off, and let's talk Monday. The only rash decision here was your email, Marcus. I've been thinking about this conversation for months. You just forced it to happen on a beach in Miami instead of in your office. I ended the call and stood there for a moment, watching a fishing boat work its way toward the harbor. The weight of what I'd just done was starting to sink in, but so was the lightness I felt. For the first time in 3 years, I wouldn't be checking my email every 30 minutes, wouldn't be apologizing for taking personal time, wouldn't be defending my value to people who clearly didn't appreciate it. Jake walked over and put his arms around me from behind. How do you feel? Terrified, I admitted, leaning back against his chest. But also free? Is that weird? Not weird at all. I'm proud of you, Em. You've been miserable there for so long. We stood there watching the waves for a few minutes before Jake asked the question I knew was coming. So what now? I turned in his arms to face him. His dark hair was getting a bit long, and the sun had brought out freckles across his nose that I'd almost forgotten he had. He'd been working as a freelance graphic designer since finishing his master's degree, mostly doing web design for small businesses and the occasional marketing campaign. His income was decent but irregular, nothing like the steady, substantial salary I'd been bringing in from Meridian. I have some ideas, I said slowly, but they're crazy ideas. I love crazy ideas, especially yours. I took a deep breath, surprised by how clearly the path forward had crystallized in my mind during that phone call with Marcus. What if I started my own construction company? Not huge projects, but residential development, custom homes, maybe small commercial buildings. Jake's eyebrows shot up. That's actually not crazy at all. You know the industry better than anyone. You have the contacts, and you understand both the construction side and the client side. But the startup costs, the licensing, the insurance, I was already running through the practical challenges in my head. We have savings, Jake pointed out, and your severance package, assuming Marcus doesn't try to screw you over there too. We walked back toward our hotel, my mind racing with possibilities. I'd been in construction for 8 years, starting right after college with a smaller firm before moving to Meridian. I understood permitting processes, zoning laws, contractor relationships, and client management. More importantly, I'd seen what clients really wanted: honesty about timelines, transparency about costs, and someone who would actually listen to their vision instead of pushing whatever was easiest for the construction company. Back in our room, I opened my laptop and started making notes while Jake ordered room service. The more I thought about it, the more feasible it seemed. I could start small, maybe partner with established contractors for the actual construction while I handled project management, client relations, and business development. What would you call it? Jake asked, settling beside me on the bed with 2 plates of fish tacos. I don't know. Something that reflects quality, reliability. I paused, thinking about what had always frustrated me about Meridian and other big construction firms. Rodriguez Residential? No, that's boring. What about something that emphasizes the personal approach, like custom touch construction or precision home builders? I was quiet for a moment, thinking about Sarah Mitchell's comment during our beach call. She'd said she chose to work with me because I understood her vision and made her feel heard. That was what I wanted to build. A company where clients felt like partners, not just sources of revenue. Foundation First, I said suddenly. The name, I mean. Foundation First Construction. Jake smiled. I love it. It works on multiple levels, literal foundations, but also building strong foundations with clients, building your business on a solid foundation. Exactly. I was getting excited now, the fear of unemployment being replaced by the thrill of possibility. And you could handle the branding, the website, all the marketing materials. Are you offering me a job, Ms. Rodriguez? I'm offering you a partnership, Mr. Rodriguez. We spent the rest of the evening brainstorming, researching licensing requirements in Florida, and mapping out a basic business plan. By the time we went to bed, I had filled 12 pages with notes about potential services, target markets, startup costs, and timeline projections. As I lay there listening to the ocean through our open balcony door, I realized I hadn't checked my Meridian email once since hanging up on Marcus. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about missing an urgent message or falling behind on a project deadline. Tomorrow, we'd fly back to Tampa and start the real work of building Foundation First Construction. Tonight, I was just Emma Rodriguez, lying next to her supportive husband, dreaming about a future where I'd never have to apologize for taking a vacation again. 6 weeks later, I was sitting in a small coffee shop in downtown Tampa, across from Maria Santos, a young couple's real estate agent. The morning sun streamed through large windows as I spread architectural sketches across our corner table, trying to ignore the knot of nervousness in my stomach. Your clients mentioned they want a modern design, but with traditional warmth, I said, pointing to the elevation drawings Jake had helped me prepare. I'm thinking clean lines, large windows for natural light, but with natural wood accents and a stone foundation that ties into the neighborhood's aesthetic. Maria nodded, studying the sketches carefully. This is exactly what the Hendersons have been looking for. They've been frustrated with other builders who keep pushing cookie-cutter designs. This was my 3rd potential client meeting since officially launching Foundation First Construction, and I was still getting used to being the one making the pitch instead of representing an established company. The business cards Jake designed were crisp and professional, but they still felt foreign in my hands. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. How's it going? Remember, you've got this. I smiled, remembering how he'd paced around our kitchen this morning, more nervous about my meeting than I was. He'd been incredible these past weeks, staying up late to design our website, creating marketing materials, and handling all the legal paperwork for our LLC filing. When I'd worried about him giving up freelance clients to focus on our business, he'd reminded me that we were building something together now, something that belonged to both of us. The timeline would be about 8 months from permit approval to move in, I continued, showing Maria the project schedule. That's realistic, not optimistic. I've seen too many builders promise 6 months and deliver in 12. Honestly, Emma, that's refreshing. The Hendersons' last builder kept moving their completion date. They finally walked away after the 3rd delay. After Maria left to present our proposal to her clients, I stayed at the coffee shop to work on estimates for 2 other potential projects. It was strange conducting business from a cafe table instead of a corporate office, but there was something liberating about it too. No office politics, no arbitrary deadlines, no Marcus looking over my shoulder questioning every decision. My phone rang, and I was surprised to see Sarah Mitchell's name on the screen. She'd been understanding when I'd explained my departure from Meridian, but we hadn't spoken since I'd helped transition her account to another representative. "Emma, I hope you don't mind me calling directly," Sarah said without preamble. "I have a situation, and I need someone I trust." "Of course, Sarah. What's going on?" "Meridian completely botched the permitting for our flagship store. They've pushed our opening back for months. And frankly, I'm not confident they understand what they're doing. I'm considering breaking the contract and finding a new construction partner." I sat up straighter, my pulse quickening. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd hoped for when starting Foundation First, but I'd imagined it would take months or years to build up to projects of this size. "That's a significant commercial project, Sarah. I'm just getting my company off the ground. I'm not sure I have the capacity for something that large." "What if we scaled it differently?" Sarah asked. "Instead of one massive flagship store, what about a smaller pilot location? Same high-end finishes, same attention to detail, but maybe 3,000 square feet instead of 10,000. I was quiet for a moment, running calculations in my head. A 3,000 square foot commercial build would be substantial for Foundation First, but not impossible. I'd need to partner with established contractors for some of the specialized work, but the project management and client relationship, those were my strengths. "Can you send me the details? Let me review what's involved and get back to you with a realistic assessment." "I'll email everything this afternoon." "Emma, I want to work with you because you listen and you deliver what you promise. That's worth more than having the biggest company name on the contract." After hanging up, I sat staring at my laptop screen for several minutes. If I could land the Mitchell contract, it would establish Foundation First as a serious player in the Tampa market. But it would also mean taking on a level of responsibility and complexity that felt both thrilling and terrifying. I drove home to find Jake in what we'd converted from our spare bedroom into a home office, designing a brochure for a local restaurant. Our house was a modest 3-bedroom ranch we'd bought 5 years ago, but it had good bones, and Jake's design sense had transformed it into something that felt much more expensive than it was. "How did the meeting go?" he asked, spinning around in his desk chair. "Good, I think." Maria seemed impressed with the proposal. I sat on the edge of the desk, suddenly needing to talk through the phone call with Sarah. But I got an unexpected call afterwards. I explained Sarah's offer, watching Jake's expression shift from excitement to concern and back to excitement as I outlined both the opportunity and the challenges. "It's a big risk," he said when I finished. "But isn't that what we signed up for when we started this company?" "I know, but what if I screw it up? What if I'm not ready for something this significant?" Jake stood up and put his hands on my shoulders, looking directly into my eyes. "Emma, you've been managing projects this size for years. The only difference is now you're doing it under your own name instead of Meridian's. It's not just about managing the project. It's about insurance, bonding, contractor relationships, permitting issues, which you understand better than most people who've been doing this for decades," Jake pointed out. "And you have something Marcus never had. You actually care about doing right by your clients." That evening, we sat on our back porch with legal pads and calculators, working through the financial implications of taking on the Mitchell project. We'd need to increase our insurance coverage, establish credit lines with suppliers, and probably hire at least one full-time employee to help with project coordination. "We have enough in savings to cover the insurance and bonding requirements," Jake said, reviewing our numbers. "And if you structure the payment schedule right, their deposits should cover most of the upfront costs." "What about your freelance work?" This would mean putting everything into Foundation First. Jake was quiet for a moment, looking out at our small backyard where we'd planted a vegetable garden the previous spring. "I've been thinking about that since you started the company. I like the freelance work, but I love what we're building together. If we're going to do this, let's really do it." The next morning, I called Sarah and scheduled a meeting for later that week. I also reached out to Tony Castillo, a contractor I'd worked with on several Meridian projects. Tony ran a small but highly skilled crew, and I trusted his work quality and his honesty about timelines and costs. Emma Rodriguez. Tony's voice boomed through the phone. I heard you went out on your own. Good for you. Meridian didn't deserve you. Thanks, Tony. Actually, I'm calling because I might have a project that could be a good fit for both of us. I outlined the Mitchell opportunity, and Tony's enthusiasm was immediate. Commercial work, high-end finishes, realistic timeline? Sign me up. When do we start? Let me get through the client meeting first, I laughed. But, assuming everything goes well, would you be interested in being our primary contractor? Not just for this project, but as we grow. Emma, I've been looking for a project manager who actually understands construction and treats contractors like partners instead of just hired help. If you're offering that, then hell yes. By Friday, I had preliminary agreements with Tony, updated insurance coverage, and a detailed proposal for Sarah's pilot store. Jake had created a presentation that was both professional and distinctly different from the generic corporate materials most construction companies used. As I drove to Sarah's office that afternoon, I thought about the conversation with Marcus that had started all of this. He'd questioned my availability and professionalism because I'd taken a weekend vacation. Now, 6 weeks later, I was about to pitch a project that could establish my company's reputation and financial stability. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus's attempt to control and diminish me had pushed me toward something I should have done years ago. I wasn't just changing jobs. I was changing the entire trajectory of my career and my life. Sarah's office was in a sleek downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Tampa Bay. As I sat in the lobby waiting for our meeting, I realized I wasn't nervous anymore. I was excited. 8 months later, I stood in the doorway of Sarah's completed pilot store, watching as her team arranged the final merchandise displays. The space was exactly what we'd envisioned: clean lines and modern fixtures balanced by warm wood accents and carefully designed lighting that made everything look welcoming rather than sterile. Emma, this is perfect, Sarah said, joining me in the doorway. My corporate team keeps asking how we finished 2 weeks early and came in under budget. I told them it's because I finally found a construction partner who treats me like a person instead of a profit margin. I smiled, remembering all the late-night phone calls and weekend site visits that had gone into making this project successful. The difference was, this time those extra hours felt like investments in my own future rather than unpaid overtime for someone else's benefit. Tony and his crew deserve most of the credit, I said, watching the electrician make final adjustments to the display lighting. When contractors trust you to make decisions quickly and pay them on time, they'll move mountains to meet your deadlines. The past 8 months had been a whirlwind of learning, growing, and occasionally panicking about whether I'd bitten off more than I could chew. But as I looked around at the finished space, I felt a deep satisfaction that I'd never experienced working for Meridian. Foundation First Construction now had 4 active projects, 3 completed builds in our portfolio, and a waiting list of potential clients. Jake had transitioned completely from freelance work to managing our marketing, client communications, and business development. We'd hired Rebecca Chin, a recent construction management graduate, to help with project coordination and permit applications. So, Sarah said, interrupting my thoughts, are you ready to talk about the flagship store? I turned to look at her, surprised. I thought you were happy with the smaller format. I am for certain locations, but I still want that 10,000 square foot flagship downtown. And after seeing how this project went, I can't imagine working with anyone else. The flagship store would be Foundation First's biggest project to date, nearly 10 times the size of any residential build we'd completed, requiring coordination with multiple subcontractors and navigating complex urban zoning requirements. A year ago, the scope would have terrified me. Now, it felt like a natural next step. Let me run some numbers and get back to you, I said. But yes, I'm definitely interested. That evening, Jake and I sat on our back porch with glasses of wine, celebrating both the completion of Sarah's pilot store and the potential of the flagship project. The vegetable garden we'd planted the year before had been replaced by architectural plans and material samples. Our small house had become the unofficial headquarters of Foundation First Construction. "We need to think about getting actual office space," Jake said, looking at the stack of blueprints that had taken over our dining room table. "Rebecca's been working from her car half the time because there's no room for her here." "I know. I found a small office space downtown that might work. It's nothing fancy, but it has good parking and room to grow. How do you feel about all this?" Jake asked, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "I mean, really, are you happy with how it turned out?" I considered the question seriously. The financial stress had been real, especially in the early months when we were living off savings and hoping our first clients would actually pay on time. There had been sleepless nights worrying about permit delays, contractors scheduling conflicts, and whether I was qualified to be running my own company. But there had also been moments of pure joy, like when the Henderson family walked through their completed home and Mrs. Henderson started crying because the kitchen was exactly what she'd dreamed of, or when Tony's crew surprised me with a Foundation First hard hat after we finished our first commercial project. "You know what Marcus said to me last week?" I asked Jake. "Marcus called you?" "He did. Apparently, 3 of his major clients have asked about working with me specifically. He wanted to know if I'd consider coming back as a senior partner with equity in Meridian." Jake raised his eyebrows. "What did you tell him?" I told him I already have equity in a construction company, 50% of one, actually, and my business partner is much better looking than he is. We laughed, and I realized that the anger I'd carried toward Marcus and Meridian for months had finally faded into something more like gratitude. Their short-sighted treatment had pushed me toward a life I never would have had the courage to choose on my own. "The funny thing is," I continued, "he kept talking about the security of working for an established company. But I feel more secure now than I ever did at Meridian. When your success depends on your own efforts and your own reputation, you can't be fired for taking a vacation or closing a deal on a beach." My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Martinez's family wants to schedule a consultation for their custom home. Same style as the Henderson house, but with a larger workshop space. When are you available?" I showed Jake the message and he grinned. "Looks like word of mouth is working. Better than any marketing campaign," I agreed. "Though your website design doesn't hurt either." As we sat there in comfortable silence, I thought about the beach in Miami where this all started. I'd been so angry about Marcus's email, so frustrated with the lack of appreciation and respect at Meridian. But that phone call had been the catalyst for building something better, not just a more successful business, but a partnership with Jake that went beyond marriage into true collaboration. "Can I tell you something?" Jake said, breaking the silence. "I'm proud of us, not just you for taking the risk, but us for building this together. Even when I was panicking about cash flow at 2 a.m., especially then, you never lost sight of why we were doing this, to build something that reflected our values, not just our paycheck." The next morning, I drove to Sarah's pilot store for the final walkthrough before her official opening. The space looked even better with merchandise in place, and there was already a small crowd of curious shoppers peering through the windows. As I checked final details with Tony and his crew, I reflected on how different this felt from completing projects at Meridian. There, finishing a job meant moving on to the next assignment with little time to appreciate what had been accomplished. Here, every completed project felt like a building block for something larger. "Hey, Emma," Tony called from across the store. "My nephew Carlos is graduating from the construction management program at USF next month. Any chance Foundation First might be looking for another project coordinator?" I smiled, thinking about the flagship store project and the 3 other potential clients who had reached out in the past week. "Tell him to send me his resume. We might be able to work something out." That afternoon, I met with Rebecca at the downtown office space Jake and I had looked at. It was a modest suite on the second floor of a renovated brick building, with large windows overlooking the Hillsborough River and enough space for 6 workstations, plus a conference room. "It's perfect for where we are now," Rebecca said, walking through the empty rooms. "And the lease terms give us room to expand into the adjacent suite if we need to." As we stood at the window looking out over downtown Tampa, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 18 months ago, I'd been Emma Rodriguez, senior sales representative, fighting for recognition in someone else's company. Now I was Emma Rodriguez, CEO and co-founder of Foundation First Construction, building a business that reflected everything I'd learned about treating people with respect and delivering quality work. My phone rang, and I was surprised to see an unknown number with a Miami area code. "Foundation First Construction, this is Emma." "Ms. Rodriguez, this is David Kim with Coastal Development Partners in Miami. We heard about your work through Sarah Mitchell, and we're interested in discussing a multi-unit residential project. Would you be available for a meeting next week?" I looked at Rebecca, who was listening with obvious excitement, and thought about Jake back at our makeshift home office, probably designing marketing materials for our next phase of growth. "I'd be very interested in learning more," I told David. "Let me check my calendar and get back to you with some available times." After hanging up, Rebecca and I stood quietly for a moment, both understanding that Foundation First Construction was about to enter another phase of growth and opportunity. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. I thought about Marcus's offer to return to Meridian as a senior partner, about the security he'd promised and the equity he'd dangled. Then I thought about building something from the ground up with people who shared my values, about clients who trusted me because I'd earned it, and about the freedom to make decisions based on what was right rather than what was expedient. "Yeah," I said, looking out at the city where Jake and I had decided to build our future. "I'm ready." That evening, I called Jake from my car as I drove home through downtown Tampa, past construction sites and development projects that might one day be potential clients. "How did the office visit go?" he asked. "We're going to take it. Rebecca is already planning the layout, and I think Carlos might be joining us soon." I paused at a red light, watching pedestrians cross the street in the early evening light. "Jake, I think we're actually doing this. We're actually building something that matters." "Of course we are," he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Did you ever doubt it?" "Only every day for the first 6 months," I laughed. "Well, I never doubted it. Not for a minute." As I drove toward home, toward the man who had supported every crazy decision and late-night worry session, toward the dining room table covered with architectural plans for our growing business, I realized that getting fired mid-vacation for being unavailable had been the best thing that ever happened to my career. Sometimes the foundation you think you're building crumbles, forcing you to start over. But when you rebuild with the right materials and the right partner, the new foundation is stronger than the old one ever could have been. Foundation First Construction was more than a company name. It was a philosophy. Strong foundations, honest relationships, and quality work. Everything else would build from there.